What's happening? I think my camera might be a little bit broken. But anyway, we'll see if this is going to work. Today I'm bored and I want to talk about free will because it is a interesting conversation. It also feels like a complete waste of time. So it has become very trendy for people to talk about free will not existing, and there's a debate about it. A lot of the biggest channels are talking about why free will doesn't exist, and then there's a couple of people. There's one video that I have watched that I actually wanted to make a response to, and because Google and YouTube was completely useless, and I did not think to save the video for later, I can't find this video now. So I have no idea what this video is. It's not a giant channel, but it was a guy that was saying a lot of things, and it was a lot of logical fallacy after logical fallacy. There's some of those logical fallacies that I like to address, but there's also just commentary about the free will debate that I think it makes the entire conversation stupid. Now, for starters, I am a determinist. I am a hardline determinist. I believe that if you had, in theory, all knowledge, that you would be able to predict everything, anything that would ever happen or anybody would ever do, whether it was choice or by design or whatever, because that's just what I think. Uh, and I'd like to go through a couple of the reasons why I think that. But there's just a couple of problems that I have with people who constantly say that free will is real. Now, being a determinist, you would think that I don't believe that free will exists. But in actuality, what I say about free will is that I think it's just kind of the experience of choice that you really don't necessarily or technically have much control over. I think that free will is much like an emotion, and that you often have a feeling of choice rather than an actual choice. Uh, it's not quite as easy to describe as anger or sadness because those things can usually be attached to hormones or some sorts of states of mind or other things that physiologically that can happen. Free will is more of a mental state than an actual uh, description of how things work. And this is why I think the whole debate is stupid because the way I see it, it's very uh, not useful to basically exposiate how free will is this huge thing and how you have a choice over everything. And it's also not really useful to debunk that either because I think just the way that we're addressing free will makes it completely wrong in general. There is no actual mechanism for what you have control over or what you choose. Everything is a result of your brain chemistry. Everything is a result of your environment. Everything is a result of what you've been trained to do, your mental state, what your current knowledge and your most recent role of uh, events will kind of lead you to down situations, and just what your culture will kind of say about you. A lot of things that you don't necessarily have control. A lot of these uber pro free will people like to bring up quantum physics. In the video that I was watching, I would love to find this video and put this on the fucking description. I just can't find it because YouTube has made it physically impossible, or I'm just an unk. I don't know. I don't know technology anymore. I thought I was learning technology, and now I'm just to a point to where everything is AI, and I just don't have the patience with it for it anymore because I don't want to make 15 more logins or find another excuse to pay more money. But they keep bringing up quantum physics and quantum fluctuations, and people keep. I'm tired of people saying that quantum physics says that reality is not deterministic. Motherfucker, which quantum physicist has ever said this? Quantum physics does not really cooperate a lot with our classical understanding of physics because it is a new realm of physics and it's very, very, very complicated. And again, I have a layman's understanding of quantum physics. I can't do any calculations about it, nor can I actually provide of much useful descriptions. But I think the best person to have explained the deterministic qualities of quantum physics, because he mentioned the double slit experiment, and they say, well, if you observe something versus if you not observe something, which is it's a misconception. Neil deGrasse Tyson explained this, and even though he's not a quantum physicist, he understands quantum particles well enough to be able to describe how, when you're small enough, light particles can affect you. Something that might be the mechanism for what it changes the characteristics of quantum particles once they're being observed. But it's also the fact that we do have math for quantum physics, which means there's some deterministic qualities about it that allows you to at least calculate some sort of an outcome. Is it complicated? Fuck yeah, it is. Jeff Bezos, who was trying to do the humble brag of trying to learn quantum physics in college, even mentioned how he had a 2 page paper. But regardless, if it was a 5 page paper, if it was a whole book that was one mathematical formula, that would still somewhat indicate, at least, or suggest some deterministic quality. First and foremost, why is it that if I were to say something along the lines of antelope or deer or some sort of animal of that nature, they don't have free will? Why is that not controversial? In the same sense, if I were to tell you as a person that you do not have free will, it is because the animal brain is a lot simpler, because we don't humanize these animals well enough to really be able to empathize as much, nor impose responsibility onto their actions, nor really think of them in a human sense. And because of that, we don't necessarily think of their brains the same way as ours. Or if I were to punch you in the face, or if I were to point a gun at you, you would probably have some very understandable physiological responses. If I were to punch you in the face, you would feel pain, and you would very likely fight, flight, or freeze. Fight, flight, or freeze. If I were to hit you, you very likely be scared. You have a pumping through your system, and your core level increasing, your heart rate would increase, and you would feel some fight, flight, or freeze. It takes a lot of training and mental preparation for somebody to be able to act around those stimuli. And I bring both of these up at the same time because it's we look at antelope as acting on base pure instinct. Uh, because if an antelope is running from a lion, right, you could say that the antelope is choosing to run. I think the problem that I have with these uber pro free will people who want to exposit everything as being free will is that it's kind of hard to understand if they're not understanding the idea of determinism, if they're not understanding the idea of responsibility, um, or choice in general. You having a choice does not mean that you are going to magically choose something that you're not kind of primed to be able to do. You need to have influences in education and understanding. And while they're not necessarily mutually exclusive, like it's why I say the free will is the experience of choice. Just because the human brain is more complex, there's nothing in the brain that is so special other than its capacity, its calorie consumption, and the many facets that it actually has. There's no at what point does it become free will? And I think this is why the conversation just kind of becomes a little arbitrary, especially when I have to listen to people who are very uber pro free will. I know enough about human psychology to generally have an understanding of how a person is going to respond if I can a certain tone, what I'm going to say, if I know enough about them, what I can say to kind of appeal to their nature. My behavior is not really, and I didn't I can be very pleasant to be around. I can be very negative. I can't blame people for not wanting to be around me. And I like that because that is a response to a sort of stimuli that I'm providing for them. Which again, it's very frustrating to me because all of these are pro free will people. And again, just happened in the video that I really want to be able to find back in this video is the the manipulative emotional appeal to this urgency of it's so dangerous to not believe in free will, must believe in free will, as if you know that that is kind of taking away people's free will a little bit and turning people who are subject to that type of argument to maybe be a little bit more convinced of you. Because the idea is so offensive to them, they forget to then be rude to you about it. As far as a matter of fact, it seems to be very based in science, even though not necessarily scientific, to say that a lot of it is kind of hinging on the idea of determinism. You can have a piece of knowledge and be able to make predicted outcomes based on that piece of knowledge and based on a hypothesis and proven theory. You can demonstrate that you know something, that you can recreate certain outcomes in very specific and narrow circumstances. And that things that aren't really being able to be answered by science are normally things that are too complicated or things that are beyond our technology to actually understand. For many of our understandings of science, for how things work in our world, we take a very scientific approach, and it seems to be very deterministic. I can't think of a single ideology except for maybe that I'm not going to take responsibility for any of my actions because I believe that things are just going to happen regardless. I don't have a choice. Like, it's nihilistic and everything is so scary anyway. The hypothetical person or the minutia of people who just think that they have absolutely no control over their lives, which whether you again, it's still deterministic by nature. I can't think of an actual ideology that is based purely on determinism, unless if you're going to falsely equivocate uh, determinism with things that really don't have anything to do with it. Particularly our and our CEOs and our newscasters, the ones that are loyal to us, a lot of them really free will. A lot of shitty people, a lot of ordinary people, shitty things, a lot of ordinary people. I trust beliefs. And just because I don't believe that I trust beliefs, doesn't mean I can't change my life anything. It just means that I feel I have influences, and my opinions are heavily influenced by those. My influences but at least I chose them. I was not very close to mind about or sort of myself. If the idea of me being wrong is so scary, these are very natural and normal human reactions to your philosophy and ideology. That is a very established psychological phenomena that requires a training and acknowledgement to be able to overcome. And it's weird to me because I look at everything like work. Maybe it's just because I look at everything like work. I don't choose to lift more weight. I train my body to lift. I don't choose to have emotional intelligence or not have emotional intelligence. There are times where I have emotional intelligence, and there are times where I have a hard time with stress. Just choose to be a better person, or to just choose to write anything. The idea of free will is incorporated in the dangerous ideologies because every ideology tries to establish itself as being so correct that you don't agree with it, you choose not to agree with that. Not enough therefore we should politicians our news leaders and our citizens constantly trying to find ways to convince people to vote against their interests, to not fight for their rights, to not try to go if free will is such a real thing, why would advertising be if free will was such a good thing, why would everybody be so focused on propaganda? Again, so much of our society, again, if you want to look at this from a legal basis, we talk a lot about responsibility and choices, but where that responsibility falls can get very complicated. Does that mean that there's no free will? No, not necessarily. But believing determinism does not get rid of responsibility. Determinism does not mean that an antelope uh, doesn't have to choose or doesn't have to run away from lion that's being chased. It doesn't mean that you have to either comply or risk death if somebody points a gun at you and asks to give money. It doesn't mean that you have to either defend yourself or try to make safety or run or do whatever it is you need to do if somebody is physically attacking you. I don't believe in those circumstances you really have many choices, but you still have responsibilities. So even if we're in this nebulous area where we're talking about determinism versus free will, it doesn't take away from your responsibility. I think that determinism is so much more useful when it comes to actually talking about real big issues. If you want to talk about free will being useful, that's fine. You can try to talk about it for individuals. It's good for giving individual advice. Hey, these things that you're doing, these are things that you could be doing better. You need to choose to do better. If you want to call that free will, but you don't get to say that people are choosing not to be healthier when they're working more hours and fast food is the only really available in a you don't say that people are choosing not to afford their bills when everything gets more expensive and wages won't go up, and you can get fired for trying to start a you to say that people are choosing to not be patriotic when your country constantly does sketchy shit and constantly breaks social contracts. All these pro-free will people really, really they lose their minds over people who have overcome trials and tribulations, over disabled people that are still moving around and doing things, because they look at that and they say, see, that's free will, that's people because they want you to be ashamed for failing, and especially failing at things that when you have really good reason for it to be. Because if you can't take care of yourself, they want to acknowledge that they might have a responsibility to stop a little bit and help you. 40 to 60% of homeless population is last that I looked up had at least one job, but not two or three jobs. And then the rest are either disabled and can't work or on drugs. But yeah, we talk about homelessness. We say that these people are losers. It shows that life that they made mistakes and not really be too concerned about it. When more and more people every single year are looking at the possibility of homelessness. But there are people, regardless of how many choices or how many correct choices that they make, or whatever correct choices that they have, there are people that no matter what you do, they're always going to be on the brink of homelessness. And the moment that things get more expensive, the moment they can't have an option, the moment that emergency happens, they're fucked. But it's always the free will people. It's always people that say that you have choices, and the ones that are obsessed with saying these things that are like, oh well, they chose that life, as if they had better options. You go into the military, you might be missing out on healthcare, you might be missing out on surgeries, you might be missing out on all sorts of future prospects that you won't have unless if you are actually willing to risk your life. Everyone at the very least comes from a very wealthy family, or from a Harvard background, or from all these communities, this community of people that both have money and know how to make money and know how to network and have a mass network of people that you are not included in, by the way. Yeah, these are the people that will come up to you and say they worked harder than you. That's bullshit. That's the lie that free will offers in our current day society, and that's why a lot of people are really having a hard time accepting the idea of free. Honestly, the idea of free will that is allowing people to avoid their responsibility to their neighbors and to themselves. Comes right back in the window, and responsibility comes back in conversation to a criminal degree when it comes to you stealing something. It's actually a very useful way of acknowledging problems, and it's also very flawed because a lot of people use belief systems and ideas to push very false narratives because it's very easy to make yourself think that you have the magic sauce or the magical formula or the magical solution to problems. Well, the job and the health insurance Cobra was going to be $1,100 a month. I made too much money and had too much money for Medicare and Medicaid. The next job I had health insurance that wasn't really taking anything that I wanted to go to. Healthcare dictates, and how we deal with our healthcare, something as simple as that. I say simple, it's very complicated. Affects by how often people go to the doctors, and the fact that we make it so complicated and so expensive makes it where easily preventable diseases are made more complicated, require more doctor visits, and are made to turn into emergencies. It's It's the free will motherfuckers that are trying to tell you a bullshit multi. There's people believe that they have control over their own health in a way that they actually you do not choose how smart the other drivers on the road are. You choose how smart a driver you are. It's not your responsibility if somebody crashes into you. If somebody crashes into you, to apologize for it to happen. And that was not because of your free will. It's your responsibility to do whatever you can to survive after the fucking ability. People are working more hours and are getting paid, especially when adjusted to inflation, less. And because of that, we have lower testosterone and worse mental health. Yet these people will also go on the news and tell you that there's a testosterone crisis, there's a mental health crisis. And then all of a sudden, the Christianity comes in and they say, well, just pray about it. It's just stupid. If I find this video, I'm happy here. I'm going to watch the video. I'll have to comment on there about the whole thing. You don't choose where this happen. The things that you're going to say, but you still have to take importance of it. And again, you try to get out of your situation, but you don't choose that situation. Free will is bullshit, but you can still make better choices. And the only way that you make better choices is if you actually learn enough to understand those choices. The sense of urgency that is constantly given to you to believe in a certain opinion is a manipulation tactic. A lot of things are manipulation tactics and logical fallacies that are meant to make you believe things that aren't true or to give people money that really don't need that money. I mean, if you want to give me money, I'm not going to stop you. But I'm never going to ask you for